In the video, you can clearly see that the American Airlines pilot cannot see the Black Hawk helicopter, and the Black Hawk helicopter cannot see the American Airlines jet. The video demonstrated had ADSB been installed, the American Airlines pilot would have seen the Black Hawk helicopter roughly a minute before the collision and would very easily have avoided the helicopter in that circumstance. Likewise, the helicopter pilot would have seen the jet almost a minute before the collision and again could have easily avoided the collision. Instead, as the simulation plays forward, it is apparent that the Black Hawk helicopter pilots never see the plane. They simply strike into it, explode, and die, and they have no idea what they just hit. The American Airlines pilot does see the helicopter about a second and a half before impact. Pulls back on the stick rapidly, the plane jerks up, but a second and a half is not time to avoid the accident. The last words on the cockpit recording are an expletive, as 67 souls died in an instant. In your judgment, if ADSB had been installed and on in those two airplanes, would that accident have been avoided?
Senator, I do want to note to start that I was required to recuse myself from that investigation because of an arrangement much earlier in my career involving American Airlines and my continuing flight privileges. Having said that, I followed the investigation very closely. I'm well aware of what you just described. And I believe ADSB would have made a huge difference. By the way, I commend you and I commend the members of the committee for your work in advancing this. I believe that is the centerpiece of the recommendations that were made as a result of our investigation.
I fully agree. The Senate has passed the Rotor Act bipartisan legislation 100 to nothing. The House, 2/3 of the House has voted for it. A bipartisan vote. It failed by a single vote because 26 House members were absent the day of the vote. We're going to get the Rotor Act passed, and I would note the House's Alert Act deliberately avoids requiring ADSB in. It deliberately avoids what you rightly described as the centerpiece of the NTSB's recommendations. The House's Alert Act would not have prevented the accident over DCA. We will get the Rotor Act signed into law. Let me turn to another topic, Mr. Chapman. Autonomous vehicles have the potential to dramatically improve road safety. However, the federal government lacks regulations that specifically address AVs, leaving states and local governments to manage what should be a national policy. Do you believe we need a national policy to regulate AVs?
I certainly do, and we are seeing benefits from autonomous vehicles. I believe we will see more. And automation generally in our automobiles has done a lot to help improve safety. But there are some significant issues, and we do not have a framework at this point for ensuring that the challenges of deploying these vehicles are properly managed and monitored. So I think it's very important that we have a federal policy in that regard.
Thank you. Senator Baldwin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Hedlund, for meeting with me last week. As you heard, I'm very concerned about the merger between Union Pacific and Norfolk Southern as proposed, especially in light of some recent comments made by UP's CEO, Jim Vena. Mr. Vena, speaking to investors just a week ago, argued that statute requires the STB to complete its review within 12 months of accepting an application, and that clock is already running. He then said that if the board does not follow that 12-month requirement, then, in his words, UP and NS does not have to follow the statute either, in reference to the public interest requirement. Ms. Hedlund, can you clarify, is it the applicant's burden to prove that this merger is in the public interest, something that they can just switch off if they disagree with the board's timeline? Is that something they can do?
Senator, I don't want to comment on the substance, as you know, of the matter because it's pending before the board, because to do so might prejudice one or more
Yeah,
of
so
the parties.
I don't want to ask you a substantive
But
question.
the statute requires that any combination or acquisition be in the public interest.
Thank you.
That is the statutory standard.
Okay. The STB's post-2001 major railroad consolidation procedures places a heightened emphasis on whether Class 1 railroad mergers enhance rather than merely preserve competition. Will you commit to following the comprehensive evaluation required by these updated standards when evaluating the merger?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. And then I wanted to raise something else that Mr. Vina has been saying as he seeks approval of this railroad mega merger. My office has received reports that Mr. Vina and Union Pacific are threatening retaliation against anyone who publicly opposes the merger. So I want your commitment to ensure that shippers, unions, short lines, and other stakeholders can participate freely and openly in the STB's merger review process without fear of retaliation. Can I have that commitment?
Yes, Senator, you do. And I would like to say any kind of retaliation against shippers or other parties to a proceeding would be utterly unacceptable.
Thank you. Mr. Epler, funding in the bipartisan infrastructure law is available only for a limited window before it lapses. Fiscal year 2023 raise grants, including awards to Wisconsin's Department of Transportation, Milwaukee, and Kenosha, Wisconsin, must be obligated through an executive grant agreement by September 30th of next year, 2027. Last year, the Government Accountability Office found that the Department of Transportation had obligated only 59% of its available bipartisan infrastructure law grant funding, the IIJA grant funding. The Chief Financial Officer is the department's steward of these dollars. If confirmed, will you commit to carefully tracking these obligation deadlines, flagging awards that are at risk of lapsing, and working across the department's